beautiful day in California, with gratitude that we're not back east. I received a phone call from relatives of mine that are back in Virginia and back east, and the temperature was 15 below zero. So it is a pleasure to welcome all of you here to the regular meeting of Wednesday, January 17th, 2024. I'm Noel Hatch. I'm the current mayor of the city. And before we start and with the call to order and the Pledge of Allegiance, I would like to indicate to the public that, and certainly to you who are here, that as a city council, as a group of individuals, that our overriding and the general goal for this year is to ensure, excuse me, that the financial strength of the city is maintained, with or without any federal aid, that we will maintain the strength that we have been noted for over the years. And second, that we will maintain the city's position in the top echelon of safe cities in the state of California. We are considered one of the safest cities in the entire state. And we will also, as part of that, maintain a fiscally responsible cities. We are at the top, and we give credit to our staff for that. This group of people here has, for many, many years, those of us who have served together here or predecessors, have maintained over the years a respectful, collegial functioning and relationship. We work well together with our city manager, and so that is an overriding goal of all of us here in this city. And finally, we want to keep open the lines of communication with the residents of this city. The core of this city is in the Laguna Woods Village. About 85–90% of our population, perhaps more than that, reside in the village. So we are important to them, and they are very important to us. So we do welcome you, and then I passed out to the group here about 16 special additional goals that we like to accomplish that will maintain the integrity and the beauty of this community that we call home. So I call this meeting to order. Members of the public in attendance wishing to speak on an agendized item may do so when the item is considered. We suggest you fill out a speaker card, which some of you have done, or you may come up one by one if you did not fill out a card when the time and the item is mentioned. Those speaking will be able to speak for up to 3 minutes unless otherwise directed by the council. If someone wishes to speak on a matter that is not agendized, during the course of this, I will open the 5th item on the agenda, which will allow you to speak, and these are non-agendized items, and you're allowed to address us at that period of time, and it would be helpful again if you would indicate to the clerk of that. With that introduction, we will call the roll.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Connors. Present. Councilmember McCary.
Present.
Councilmember Horn.
Here.
Councilmember Moore.
Present.
And Mayor Hatch.
Sure. And Annie, Councilmember McCary, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Absolutely. If you all rise, face the flag, and if you are a veteran, you may salute the flag. Otherwise, repeat it with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Occasionally, we have some special people here for special purposes.
We always have special.
No, I meant to come out there. Again. But we do. All right. And I'm going to ask Councilman, Mayor Pro Tem Horn to introduce a young lady who has a very interesting presentation.
The young lady here is the general manager of vector control in Orange County. This is Laura Young. She took over earlier this year and had huge shoes to fill, and she's made them even bigger and with high heels and doing it backwards, so she's great, and I'm really pleased to introduce her.
So good afternoon. I was going to say good evening. I'm usually at night at city council meetings. So thank you for the opportunity to speak. And today I'm really going to focus on mosquitoes as well as a project that we're working on in a neighboring city. So you have some information. And I did try to keep it as short and brief. And I'm happy to come back repeatedly to give you information on other topics. And I'm always available, as Sherry knows, for questions or comments, or if you want to talk in more depth. So if you go to the next slide, just a little bit about our district. We are an independent special district. We're one of two special districts that cover all of Orange County. It's us and the Cemetery District. So if we do our job right, then you don't have to know about them. And then we do have the largest board in the county, though. We have a 35-member board of trustees, one representative from each city and one county at large, and your representative is Councilwoman Horn. And then we have a $17 million budget that's funded through benefit assessments and property tax. So next slide. So as part of our programming, the Orange County Mosquito and Vector Control District has an integrated vector management program, which means we use a lot of different tools to do what we do. And a lot of what we do is education and outreach. That's through you as council members, through city staff, and through our own communications team to get residents to be aware of what to look for, how to be preventive, as well as how to take proactive action in reducing mosquito sources. And then the other things we do is mosquito surveillance. So during summer months, we have over 200 traps that go out every week throughout the county of Orange. And typically we have a trap in every city, if not more, depending on that activity. A major work we do is our source reduction. It's a lot easier to control for mosquitoes when they're in the water source. When things are not flying around, they're a lot easier to eliminate. And so most of our work with cities and infrastructure is removing those water sources or the ability to hold water. And then the last thing we do is control. That's probably where we get most of our media when we do any adult control, but it's really probably the most or least used amount of product and control measures we do. We do a lot of biological control in flood channels and gutters. Our adult mosquito control is typically reserved for disease cases and responding to prevent human infection and disease. So if we go to the next slide, just to touch a little bit more about what we do. We have a lot of outreach events, presentations. We have a very robust social media program as well as our website. But we're here to help you provide any kind of outreach that you have. So if you have an event coming up or want us to speak to a community group, we're always available to do so. And I talked about surveillance. So our lab is one of the few state labs that provides testing, in-house testing for pathogens. So we actually in-house test for all the diseases in the mosquitoes. And we can turn around those results in one day typically. So we can react a lot faster and be able to respond to those risks a lot faster. And then our control, we don't just do mosquito work, although most people just know us for that. We also do red imported fire ants, rats, and filth flies. So we have a wide array of programs we do. So if we go to the next slide, a lot of our inspection and control of mosquitoes is in those publicly accessible areas or large sources. So abandoned swimming pools, gutters, storm drains, flood channels, things that people don't really think about, all that water under our feet and around us that there's nobody that's really controlling for that water. And then if you go to the next slide, there's some other sources like cemeteries and BMPs that are required by a lot of cities to help with stormwater. They're called best management practices. We call them big mosquito problems. So, and then just city infrastructure. Typically, a lot of the city infrastructure we work with is in northern Orange County just because it's older and has more aging infrastructure, but it's happening all throughout the county. And then we have wetlands and marshes we handle as well. So if we go to the next slide. Residential sources are a big source for the mosquito I'm going to focus on today, and those are flower pot saucers, basically anything that can hold water, kids' toys. We saw a lot of people that put in gardens and put raised garden beds, and as COVID dissipated and got on with their lives, they have forgotten about those, and those hold water tarps. And a lot of what our focus is educating those residents so they can control and provide some maintenance of their own property. So going to the next slide, I really do want to talk about the two main mosquitoes that impact residential areas. We have 27 different mosquitoes in Orange County. I always tell people, don't try to ID the mosquito, just kill it. If you really want an ID and you haven't squished it to smithereens, we can try to do that for you. But our Culex mosquitoes are our native mosquitoes. They're the ones we've had for years and years and years, and they are dusk and dawn biters. They are our main transmitters of West Nile virus, and they typically will bite outdoors. They don't prefer people as a food or a blood source. They prefer birds. So we are sort of the incidental host. We got in their way, we were convenient. Our newer mosquitoes, which everybody loathes, are our Aedes mosquitoes, and they are black and white striped mosquitoes. Really bad flyers, that's why you're getting bit on your ankles and legs. They don't have the strength to fly, and so they fly low. And they are aggressive day biting, where our Culex mosquitoes like to feed once and fill up. Our Aedes mosquitoes are more like tapas or appetizer biters. They like to bite multiple times and get a little blood every time. And they love mammals, which includes us and pets. And so they are the ones that they're really impacting the quality of life we have here in Orange County. And it's not just Laguna Woods. Every city has it. Everyone's being impacted. It's across California. They have an evolution pattern that really makes them a successful survivor of life. And so if we go to the next slide, you can see with our West Nile virus mosquitoes, which are our Culex mosquitoes, we have it year-round. We never get such cold temperatures that our mosquitoes completely die off. I got a mosquito bite yesterday, and I killed him though, so he's not gonna bite anyone else in my house. But West Nile virus, we see the activity every year. It's typically focused in northern Orange County because it's more dense, has lower grade, so not as many hilly areas and water doesn't flow. Going to the next slide. Our invasive Aedes mosquitoes are in all 34 cities, as I mentioned. We have seen a significant increase in the population. So this last year, we saw about a 4 times increase in population across the board, across all counties. And part of that was due to late summer rains. We had Hurricane Hillary. We had a hurricane come through, or a tropical storm by the time it got to us, but it provided enough rain for them to continue their life cycle a little bit longer. And then we had continued hot weather into October and November. So, and even with this cold weather at 60 degrees, it's not going to completely kill them off. We need East Coast weather, where we're in the deep freeze, where you see a significant die-off of mosquitoes. But like I said, they've learned how to thrive. So even on the East Coast, they just go in the subway systems to keep warm and overwinter. So they have evolved and pretty smart predators. So if we go to our next slide, these are the mosquitoes we have. Our highest abundance of mosquitoes are our Aedes aegypti. Like I said, don't ID them, just go ahead and squash them if you see them. And then I just want to go to the next slide because I want to get to the meat of the topic, which is why we're so worried about these mosquitoes. One of the challenges in treating for these mosquitoes and controlling is that they do lay their eggs singularly on multiple containers. So even if we control for one container, they still have eggs in another. And they do survive in dry conditions. So if your pot doesn't have any water, they'll lay their eggs. They're good for about 3 years. If you transport the pot, you just move some mosquitoes with you. A lot of times people would gift plants, and that's how these mosquitoes have transported through different areas. And so they have a really persistent way of surviving. And if we go to our next slide, And for us, it's really a challenge. We can't get into every backyard. Sometimes we don't even find the water sources because they're so small and cryptic. We don't know they're there, and they are biting people, and they do have the potential to transmit disease. So I used to do this presentation and say, they were able to transmit disease, but we don't have those diseases in California. And this last year, we had locally transmitted dengue in Long Beach and in Pasadena. So we now know those diseases are in California. They're not in Orange County, and we haven't found them in our mosquitoes. But it's no longer, are they gonna come here? It's a matter of when. And so we need to be prepared and have the tools to be able to combat these mosquitoes in the most appropriate manner. So if we go to our next slide. So we look at SIT. Now, SIT is sterile insect technique. It's been used for generations in agriculture and has been successful in fruit fly suppression. So Southern California has the largest sterile insect technique program out of Los Alamitos Air Force Base. They drop millions of sterile fruit flies across Los Angeles, San Diego, and Riverside County and Orange County to suppress those populations and protect the agricultural industry in Northern California. So we're looking at sterile insect technique as applies to mosquitoes, which is a newer implementation of that technique. And how we do that is we take the male mosquitoes and we sterilize them. And then we release them out to the community. Male mosquitoes don't bite, so they have no impact. And then they mate with the female mosquitoes, and those eggs are no longer viable. And so it suppresses that population by having the males control for the females. So we're using mosquitoes to fight mosquitoes. And so how we do that, if you go to the next slide, is we're using the sterilization process as the reduction or control method, and it's very specific to that breed, so they cannot breed with another mosquito, they cannot pass that sterilization along. It's just that male mosquito that has been x-rayed and no longer has viable reproductive ability. And so if we go to the next slide. So this is how it works with irradiation, which is the method that we have a project ongoing. We have the male mosquitoes. They're either collected out in the field and raised, or we purchase them from someone that produces them from our strain of mosquitoes. We grow them from egg to adults. We put them to sleep in very cold weather, and then we sterilize them. We put them in a little machine. They get a dose of x-ray. It's similar to the same dose of x-ray everybody gets when they walk through the x-ray machine at the airport. It's just for them, they're a lot smaller, so it has a bigger impact. And then once they're x-rayed, we make sure that they have the adequate sterilization. And so then we release them in the public, or not in the public, we release them in an area, and so that they can mate with the female mosquitoes. We call this a project because there's a lot of, this is a very oversimplification of what's going on. We're doing a lot of testing and research and double checking for quality standards before we even get to that release point. So if we go to the next slide. So we are actually in a partnership with our sister agency, which is the Greater Los Angeles County Vector Control District, and we both have a specific area that we have allocated to do this project. Our area is in Mission Viejo, and it's a very small area. It impacts about 700 homes, about a quarter of a square mile. And so if we go to the next slide. So what we're looking for is to see if the implementation of an SIT project or a program will help to reduce the population of the invasive Aedes mosquitoes. This is only for Aedes mosquitoes. And this will allow us to be able to control for those mosquitoes, especially in high-risk areas where we know that disease is coming back into our community. So if we go to the next slide. So why did we pick Mission Viejo? Believe it or not, when we started this project, we thought there'd be hesitation, and we had multiple cities saying, pick me, I want to be in on this, because the Aedes mosquitoes were so bad. But Mission Viejo seemed to excel in having the most mosquitoes that we can find. They did a really good job of that. They have very lush backyards that are tropical and perfect habitat for these mosquitoes, and a lot of yard drains, we found out. And so this community had one of the highest counts that we could find, and so it was determined that this would be the best area to do this project in. And then we go to the next slide. And so this is the rough area. It does have some geographical borders, like the freeway and a flood channel behind it that allows for some natural borders. Mosquitoes tend not to fly over freeways or large streets. They stay within their little neighborhoods. So this was the area, and then if we go to the next slide, I'll outline the time. So we actually started this a lot before 2023, but this is when we actually went public with it, and we did a community kickoff. We continued our internal lab studies, but we reached out to the cities. We engaged our board of trustees so that everybody was aware of what was going on. We did some mosquito trapping, a lot of preliminary trapping, and then we did a survey for the residents inside that area, as well as one in our control group as well. And then in August, we released a number of mosquitoes that we had dusted with fluorescent lighting to determine how far they fly, how long they fly, and how long they live. And surprisingly enough, we found that they lived longer than most research had indicated. So that was surprising to us that we had very strong and robust mosquitoes here in Orange County. And then in March, we will do another series of studies to continue to find out where we need to focus our release, and then we are going to continue increasing community engagement, so both in that area and outside that area, and in the surrounding cities, so that everybody really knows and we're transparent with what's going on, what the goals are, and what those expectations are. What we really want to set that expectation is this is not going to solve every problem and all problems. This is a very labor-intensive program, and so we're looking to see how can this be implemented in a small scale and what resources are going to be needed for larger scales. And then in August of 2024, that's when we anticipate our project release occurring, which would be the actual sterile mosquito. So none of those are out in the community at this point. And so if we go to the next slide. So this is what our residents in Mission Viejo have really been seeing. They've been seeing a lot of us, a lot of our cars, a lot of our staff. We have over 20 different trap sites in that community. We do pop-up events so that they're just aware. And then if you go to the next slide, this is the ones that are in the site area. We've talked to them about the difference between a male mosquito and a female mosquito, because we don't want to increase anxiety over people seeing more mosquitoes when we know we're going to have an increase in the population. And again, we also educate them that it's okay if you kill some of our male mosquitoes. Life is life. And so we understand that you're going to do some control around your house, but we just need you to be aware of why they're happening. And so if you go to the next slide. So in summary, most of this project is going to be focused in Mission Viejo, and that's where a lot of our outreach is. But we keep our board informed, and I know Councilwoman Horn is really good about sharing that information as we progress in this project and what the eventual outcome is and what our future plans are. But overall, we're looking to find new tools for our tool belt to combat these new challenges that we're having with new species. So
All right,
thank you.
stay right there.
Yes.
Okay, let's start over here and
I just had two quick questions. One of them is out of curiosity. Who do you do your insurance with? The independent districts
Like our workers' compensation.
and all the insurance.
Oh, yeah, so we're actually a joint powers authority with all the vector controls. It's called VCJPA.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're in a JPIA with part of some group within the independent districts.
Yes, all the vector controls pull together, and we have a JPA together.
Very interesting. I forgot what the other question was, so I guess I'll have to leave it at that. Thank you. It was very interesting.
we'll come back. And to you.
Is anybody working on CRISPR technology to do gene editing on the mosquitoes to eliminate their capacity to harbor disease so that that spreads through the population, and then we can not worry about how many mosquitoes there are, except that they're a nuisance, but they're not a health risk?
There are, there's, I want to say 3 or 4 different researchers in different universities working on CRISPR technology. And one of the reasons we went with irradiation or X-ray is that it doesn't require additional permitting and additional EPA regulations, because we're not changing the mosquito, we're just sterilizing them. When you start doing gene editing and or adding biological bacteria, it becomes a pesticide or considered a pesticide, and so it has to go through EPA and then California EPA regulations and approved. So none of those are approved in California at this time.
Annie?
I think Carol asked my question, and then someone else asked my other question. And I think you addressed it. Where did they come from initially? Did they come from abroad? You mentioned something about plants and that sort of stuff. So how did we get here?
So they're initially an Asian mosquito found in East Asia. They came to us from California through ports that were transporting lucky bamboo. So the first instance they were found, they did a heavy suppression at the port and were able to control for it. And then the second time, we don't know when it happened, we just sort of found them in the community. Los Angeles County found them first. Not saying they gave them to us. Someone else probably brought them over here. And people bring plants through borders, through planes, so you can't really narrow down where they came from.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you so much for coming, Laura. But there was a program, Debug Fresno, and I'm not sure which method they used, the irradiation or the Wolbachia or the gene manipulation, but it was like 98% successful.
Yeah, so it was Wolbachia, which is a gene it's a naturally occurring bacteria that's not found in mosquitoes, but it's found in other insects, and it was inserted into the male mosquitoes. And basically that makes them incompatible to breed with the females. So that was a federally approved test program, and it had a short-term approval through Cal EPA and the federal EPA. And they found it during the release period, there was a 98% suppression. And then once that program's over, now they have the mosquitoes back. So any of these SIT programs, it's an ongoing, it's not a one and done. It's every season you will continue to suppress because eradication is almost impossible at this point.
But it's wonderful we'll have another tool that we don't have to just spray poisons. That's why I care a lot. Years ago, they used to spray poison from the air for mosquitoes. And I think this is a great technology. But it really highlights why you have to run all the water in your house, because the Asian mosquitoes like to breed in our homes, and they like us as a meal, so they'll breed in your drains. They'll breed in your flower pots at home, so don't forget to run the water, because even after 2 or 3 days, they could be breeding in your drain. So everywhere there's water, think mosquitoes.
I don't think I'm going to go home after that, Sherry.
Thank you so much, Laura.
As Cynthia has, Cynthia does, and then Carol.
Aside from vector control, do these mosquitoes have any natural enemies?
Not in Orange County. There's no natural predator. Bats will eat some mosquitoes, but never enough to significantly reduce the population. If you think of bats feeding, they would prefer a moth, a lot meatier, a lot more satiating than a little mosquito that has no meat on it. So no, and not at the rate in which they are, multiplying in their population.
Carol.
Question, I saw the opossum listed on there. How do they figure into the program that you offer?
So possums are not the actual issue. They're the carriers. They carry fleas, and possums are known to be the majority carrier of cat fleas. And the cat fleas can have a disease called flea-borne typhus. So we've seen an increase in flea-borne typhus just in our community in general. Part of that is we have more feral cats in our community, and then people tend to feed them. And when you feed cats, you're feeding possums as well, because they're going to come to the food source. And so the backyards and just the habitat has more fleas.
I would think that the coyotes then would figure into that, because they go after people's cats when they let them out. Go ahead.
Yeah, they can. And when you have food sources for cats, you tend to feed possums, raccoons, rats. You'll feed any wildlife. And if you do have a food source for coyotes, you'll have more coyotes. And that food source is rabbits, rats, cats. Not really possums. For some reason, they don't really like possums. And they don't really like raccoons, but probably because they fight back.
Right.
But yeah, so it's sort of like a circle of life. You feed one thing and you're going to create a new habitat for a whole new animal source.
Thank you.
All right. As I told you before the meeting started, I used to love to go outside in my back patio and paint pictures, okay? I was driven from that pleasure by mosquitoes. Now, is there anything out there commercially that we can buy that will insulate our tender skins, our ankles and feet, which they come after, or any spray that makes any sense?
I'll give you 3 solutions. You could try all 3 or pick which one you want to try first. One is to wear long pants.
I do that.
Okay. And then wear EPA registered repellent. And if you don't want to put that on your skin, I always recommend putting it on your pants.
Oh.
That way, you don't have it necessarily on your skin, but if you're still protected. The other one is to buy a fan.
A fan?
A fan, like I mentioned, they're not strung flyers, so you put a fan on medium rotating at your feet and have it just going. You get a nice cool breeze. They can't land on you and they can't bite you. And
All right, what's your schedule for the next 3 or 4 weeks? When can you come back?
I'm in Garden Grove. I'm happy to come back anytime.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for
Thank
bringing
you.
her. All right, we receive and file this presentation, and Laura, we'll see you later.
Bye, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Now we come to public comments, gentlemen. This is the time and place for members of the public to address the City Council on matters not appearing on the agenda. Pursuant to state law, the City Council is unable to take any action if we have any suggestions as a result of these public comments, but we may ask clarifying questions of a speaker, engage in brief discussion, refer items to city staff, or schedule items for consideration at future meetings. Now, I have here the request to speak from Bill, and I'm not, Kaufman, is it, Bill? Right. All right, come on up, Bill. Bill is currently lives in Upland, California. All right. And
Mayor, City Council, I just got out of the hospital 2 days ago from a long stay, so, bear with me. In any event, my mother lived in Laguna Woods, and actually was Leisure World at that time, since '85 to 2005. So I'm very familiar with it. And we have chosen Laguna Woods as what we feel would be an excellent projection of what we want to do, which is going to be, we know that you folks have passed an ordinance that will allow dispensaries in Laguna Woods. Myself, and another individual, I've been extensive with herbal medicine. My associate is internationally known. He's on Forbes magazine. And I have a Coldwell Banker real estate man here. We are proposing, versus having a traditional marijuana dispensary, which I have nothing against, to have a health center, and which will have 2 segments. One will be a cannabis section, and it will have marijuana and female hemp. The other side would be all other herbal products that would be manned by 6-year trained herbalists, so that we can offer to the citizens of Laguna Woods a complete spectrum of herbal remedies versus just marijuana. And typically they don't deal in hemp. We would also offer seminars, and we would do them probably once monthly and pick a specific herb that we would educate people on and what it will do for you. So when you come into our establishment, it wouldn't be glamour and it wouldn't look like what do they call it? The Apple stores and so forth. You would be greeted by someone. You would be asked what you would like. No, there's no sales going on, and we would then direct you to the area that you can be educated on what you have a problem with. Some people have no clue about any of it, but we would have staff that would be absolutely educated. There would be no one that would be close to what we would call the old head shops and all that kind of stuff. This would be very sophisticated, and again, we're not into sale, but we're into educate. And how I got started in this was because my stepfather was here with my mom, and in those days you almost had to sneak things in, and they had a number of problems that I would sneak things in for them, and it was amazing of how that spread through the community. Is your son coming down? Is your son coming down? Type of thing. And it is. This is medicine. That's what we got to. It's not drugs. It's medicine, and it does things for not only for 2-year-olds for their having their various seizures and so forth, up to we have in our compounding area 103-year-old man who comes in and gets these compounded, and that's another thing that happens in the herbal section. The compounding. That we can compound in our store. And I had a store like this in Venice, California. We would compound and send out to 50 or 60 different doctors that they would request these different drugs. So
Another minute.
one more minute?
Yeah, 1 more minute.
Okay.
You have 3 minutes total.
What I would like to do is I'm going to turn this over to Herman, who's our real estate guy. I would like to talk to Christopher, city manager, and set a meeting up and discuss this further, because 3 minutes is not nearly long enough to discuss what I want to discuss. But I think, and we have other cities that we're going to be moving Pharmacy Plus, and I think that this would be a prime example to show people what's available in the herbal world versus in the pharmaceutical pill popping.
Well, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Now, Herman, and is it Jensen?
Yes, that's correct. Good afternoon, Mayor Hatch and City Council. Thank you for having us tonight, or this afternoon. It's not that late. And my name is Herman Jensen. I've been with Coldwell Banker Real Estate for about 30 years, and I've recently joined Pharmacy Plus. I was a chance encounter sometime last year with Mr. Kaufman, and he introduced me to this concept of wellness and THC products. And I was intrigued, and I started to look into it. And as you can see, I have since joined Pharmacy Plus. I'm extremely excited about this concept of not just selling THC products to clients and customers, but also the consulting aspect and the wellness aspect of it, which I find extremely important. I've been a consumer myself, pretty much not throughout my life, but it has been proven extremely helpful, especially as I'm getting older. I'm the older age bracket, and so I'm using it as a sleeping aid and that sort of thing. And so I'm excited to start a new career, if you wish. Not brand new, but somewhat new. I have a background in real estate, as you probably gathered by now, and I'm securing real estate, have secured a location in Montclair for us, which hopefully will be a flagship location in that area with the same concept, wellness and THC products and seminars and educational stuff that we provide to the community. So I'm excited to be here in Laguna Woods today, and I'm also excited to be home shortly to rearrange my backyard and see what I can do to prevent more mosquitoes.
Do you live here in
Again,
Orange
thank you
County?
for having us, and we are looking forward to potentially have more conversations in
Thank you.
detail with the appropriate members.
Do you
of
live
this.
here in Orange County, sir?
No, I live in Claremont as well.
Okay, Claremont.
And this is how I met Bill. He
Okay.
was investigating one of my properties up there.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Appreciate it.
Mr. Hatch. Thank you.
Certainly, our city manager will be happy to visit with you if you wish to contact him. All right?
That would be perfect. Thank you so much.
Now we have a resident of our city. Let's see, James Tung. Come on up, James.
Well, thank you very much. This is the first time I come to a council meeting because I've been living in this city for over 10 years, 11 years. But I really don't know what's going on in the city. So my comments, first one, of course, is very positive comments about this senior mobility program. I have not used it, although I already got the card, but my wife and her friends really enjoy this program because they, my wife and her friends are free to drive on the freeway to go over 10 miles. So when they go to shopping, a couple shopping malls, south, I guess, city, and then north. So they find it's very, very helpful. And they say the taxi just come in such a sharp time and very accurate. So we really appreciate this program. Of course, I wonder how much does the city have to spend on this money? I know it's subsidized, but that's a very nice program. And then a little bit negative part is I've been here 11 years, but I really don't know what's going on. For example, in fact, Carol knows, I'm involved with the raising the money for our new library.
Yeah.
However, we really don't know what's the progress on our library.
Stop right there. Don't say another word for just a minute. Stop right there.
Okay, you're going to make a comment?
Yeah, I'm going to keep you around for the next 2 or 3 hours so you can talk to the city manager and others about the status of the library, and certainly.
Yeah. Okay. So my comments is really just the residents need somehow get more informed.
Yeah.
That's all. And then the second part is a similar thing is we know our shopping mall. It's been tried to be reconstructed for a long time, and we see the changes, but we don't know where are we going for the new the mall. The next.
Laguna Hills Mall. The people here
It's
do
not
access.
our city?
Is it
No, that's
important?
our neighbors.
Well, that's
But
why I need to come to this meeting more often because I'm fairly ignorant on the city. Thank you.
Questions?
That's a very good suggestion. Let's make a note to have someone from Laguna Woods come up and make a presentation on and notify the village of a speaker about the mall. Now, Cynthia.
Usually, we have a representative from the Globe at our meetings, and we've had regular public announcements about the progress on the library. And I think it's unfortunate that the Globe has not published that to advise our residents. But I will tell you that we're having a grand opening on January 27, so you're just in time.
And you should come.
Might want to tell the time.
Any other?
9 a.m. to 11 a.m.
It'll be right out here in front.
January 27th.
Thank you very much, James, and for you gentlemen for your time and coming and for the information you shared with us. That will conclude our public comments on non-agenda items, and we come now to some business which has been agendized. First will be the city treasurer's report. We'll turn the time over to our city manager who introduced one of the outstanding employees of this city who keeps us afloat in many ways. So, Chris.
Thank you. I want to give some credit to Councilmember Moore for the idea to move the city treasurer's report from a standing part on the consent calendar to a standing discussion item. So starting this month, we're going to receive a brief report from our city treasurer, Liz Torres. We're also continuing to tinker with the treasurer's report itself, so that'll start looking different in the next couple of months to provide a little bit more information in maybe a little easier to digest manner. But for today, we wanted to take a shot at just a brief overview of that document. And I think with that, I'll let Liz take it away. There's a couple of slides that will come up on the screen behind you. It would also be our intent in the future to provide the slides in the agenda packet as well, just so you have them ahead of the report as well. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chris. So as Chris mentioned, this is the information for the treasurer's report as of December 31st, 2023. As of December 31st, our cash and investments are $13 million. The general fund has about $9.7 million, and the special revenue funds have $3.5 million. As you know, the general fund is a primary operating fund of the city. The general fund have revenues that are not legally restricted or committed to expenditures for specified purposes. However, the special revenue funds are restricted for certain purposes, primarily for transportation-related expenses. So while it is true we have approximately $13 million in the bank, only $9.7 million is available for the majority of the city's operations. The $13 million is broken down with cash and cash equivalents of $770,000, pooled money investment accounts of $7 million, and certificates of deposit of $5 million. As you can see, the majority of our investments are in pooled money investment accounts with over 55%. That includes OSIP and LAIF. And in the OSIP account, we have $6.6 million and $815,000 in LAIF. In December, OSIP had 4.348 in interest rates, and LAIF had 3.929%. In the month of December, we had 4 CDs that matured, in totaling $975,000. Of that $975,000, we reinvested $735,000 to purchase 3 CDs. Each CD was $245,000, and they range from 12 months to 24-month terms, and at different interest rates from 5.15%, 5.35%, and 4.8%. The rest of the amount of $240,000 was deposited to the city's checking account. We have noticed that CD rates are starting to decline, so we anticipate on working with a broker to pursue other investments with higher interest rates in the future. The city also has 2 trust funds as of December 31st to pre-fund future OPEB and pension costs. The Surbit Trust Fund has $136,472,000, and in December it had a net gain of $7,132. I'm sorry, $7,132. We also have the SEP Trust account, in which we haven't currently contributed to. However, we're planning on making contribution recommendations at the next meeting. That concludes the treasurer's report information. There is now an opportunity for public comments and city council questions. Staff's recommendation for the city council is to receive and file the city treasurer's report for the month of December 2023.
Thank you, Liz. We have public comments. Catherine,
I want to applaud that presentation.
would you state your name first?
This is
Catherine?
something that I've been pushing for and talking with Carol on, and really feel is so important that an agency, a government agency, whether it's the water district or a city, be open and transparent to the residents and to the citizens, the status of the agency, which this does a very good job. In fact, I talked with Liz before, telling her what I thought she should do, and she's already done it. So with her presentation, because what I saw in the agenda, it needed to be explained a little bit better, and her explanation was excellent. And I compliment Chris and you all for beginning to take the step, because so many city councils don't do it. And so many agencies don't. They use although they do have 2 meetings a month, so they have a financial committee meeting so that citizens can go to. But at the council meeting, they don't cover the depth of detail that Liz just did here. I think you ought to be applauded for it, and I want to applaud you for following up on it. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate that, Catherine. And from this particular seat, and then we'll have anyone on the council. Let's start. Carol, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm really pleased to receive that report. And I think the big one going back is our pension liability. I can't imagine who else, I wonder, in the county, Chris, is at the same position. Do you think?
There are very few cities, I think, that have been as aggressive and proactive about paying down the pension liability.
In a future one, today, we have auditors, and we all know that there are auditors who come, but I think more important, and I think it would be good, Chris, to highlight the in-house, because really, even though people have auditors, we've seen this terrible problem that occurred with that school district in Northern County, and it's your internal controls. And I would like, if you don't mind, at a future one, if you could just mention some of the internal controls that we have, because I think that reassures our community. Not only do we have good financials, we have really good, we have auditors, obviously, but we also have those good internal controls. And I think, that'd be a good highlight. Thank you so much. These are good news, but our neighbors need to know that too.
If I can add a comment onto what Carol said, she's absolutely right that most agencies are not current on their pensions. If you take a look at it, it's hard to follow because not everybody has a trust established. And because of the way the accounting is done, you see it as an asset and a liability. And, so people have to be into accounting to really kind of understand. But she did a good job. I mean, she said it was zero because your trust is paid up. And I think that's an important factor for the citizens to understand, that there is no ongoing obligation of the city to any of its employees at this point when they retire, because you're fully funded at that point, which is not something that occurs. I'm trying to think of any other agency that I'm aware of that's fully funded at this point. I can't think of any right now offhand. There's a few, but not many. Thank you.
I want to thank you, Liz, for an excellent presentation. I have to say, Catherine is a tough audience to impress. So if you've impressed Catherine, you've done a good job.
Sherry, any comments?
It's always been a joy working on the investment committee, and so I kind of took all this information as a given because we get it all the time, but I'm glad you presented it and that it was well received. Thank you.
And Annie?
And kudos again, ditto for what everyone has already said. Very informative. Thank you.
Yes, I obviously echo that, and going over it with is it my hearing aids that created that? So, but that drives me nuts and you nuts. Can you all hear it, or is it just me?
Yeah. Mr. Mayor, I move that we receive and file this financial report.
That's fine. Okay. All in favor, say aye. No? Unanimous? Thank you, Liz. All right. We're now to the consent calendar. All items on the consent calendar are considered routine and will be handled by one vote. There will be no separate discussion on any item unless there is a member of the public that would like to speak on a particular item. If none, then we will call the,
I'll move the consent calendar.
all right, it's been moved. Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The consent calendar is approved as presented. Public hearings. Item 8.1, sidewalk vending regulations. Staff will give us a report on this item.
Yes, I will. Give me just 1 second to get the... Sorry, our slides shut down on me here. All right. Sidewalk vending regulations. This is the first of 2 public hearings today. This item appears in the current budget and work plan as a significant work plan item. It's been in our work plan for a couple of years in response to California Senate Bill 946, which was adopted in 2018, and I'm speaking very generally here, but generally requires cities and counties in areas where there are no cities to allow public sidewalks and public pedestrian paths of travel to be used for street vending purposes. Street vending, as defined by this particular state law, is the sale of food or merchandise. So it can be anything from selling fruit to selling prepared food to selling other tangible goods, t-shirts, banners, flags, that sort of thing, from either a push cart, a stand, just off of your own person, but some sort of non-vehicular means of sale. The state law differentiates between roaming sidewalk vending and stationary sidewalk vending. Stationary sidewalk vending is vending from a table or some other fixed point that doesn't move during the course of business. And then roaming sidewalk vending is something more akin to someone pushing a cart down a public sidewalk. Want to be very clear at the start of the presentation that this state law does not apply to private property. So what we're talking about today is a requirement under state law for the city to allow its public sidewalks to be used for these limited commercial purposes, but it doesn't extend the same requirement to shopping centers or office buildings or private communities like Laguna Woods Village or any of the other private residential facilities in Laguna Woods. Cities are, again, generally allowed only to regulate when those regulations directly relate to an objective health, safety, or welfare concern. Senate Bill 946 calls out specifically that perceived community animus or opposition to sidewalk vending and economic competition with more fixed, traditional brick and mortar type businesses are not objective health, safety, or welfare concerns that cities can base regulations on. The proposed set of regulations is included as an exhibit to the proposed ordinance, so that's Exhibit A to Attachment A. I want to walk through some of what I would consider more of the key parts of the ordinance, but there are certainly other regulations that are included in the agenda packet that we can discuss if there's interest in that. At a high level, the regulations call for sidewalk vendors to obtain a sidewalk vending permit from the city prior to commencing the sale of food or merchandise on public sidewalks. With that permit, there's a requirement for the sidewalk vendor to obtain any other permits or licenses required by government agencies. So this could be things like food facility permits required by the Orange County Healthcare Agency, permits required by the Orange County Fire Authority. There's a requirement in state law for anyone who sells tangible goods in the state of California to obtain a seller's permit from the California Department of Tax and Fee Administration. We have the ability under state law to require proof of those permits and licenses as part of our permitting process, so we've included that requirement. There's also a requirement for sidewalk vendors to provide insurance and indemnification for the use of the city property. And very specifically, we've included a requirement for two different acknowledgements. One, that the use of public property is at their own risk. And the second, and I think this is very key in this whole discussion, that public property, and by public property, I again mean public sidewalks and public pedestrian paths of travel, those properties are not constructed, nor maintained, nor intended for sidewalk vending purposes. I think at the staff level, we understand that the state is requiring that this activity be permitted on public property, but I think it's very important to convey to sidewalk vendors that these sidewalks have not been constructed with this particular use in mind, and we're making no warranties or representations as to whether or not it's conducive for the sidewalk vending use that nevertheless state law allows. There are also a variety of operations requirements in the proposed regulations. And again, generally speaking, state law doesn't allow the city to prohibit sidewalk vending in too terribly many locations, but we have identified a couple of objective public safety related reasons to prevent sidewalk vending in very limited areas. One would be in crosswalks or driveway crossings. It doesn't prevent a roaming sidewalk vendor from using a crosswalk or using a driveway crossing, but the regulations do prohibit that sidewalk vendor from engaging in transaction when they're in that vehicle pedestrian interface area. There's also a prohibition on sidewalk vending in locations that would either obstruct the visibility of or impede access to or use of certain types of public safety and traffic related fixtures. This ranges from traffic signals to traffic signs to any sort of kind of directional wayfinding public safety purpose, in addition to public surveillance cameras or related fixtures that, if the sidewalk vending were to occur, might be obstructed thereby. The state law also allows the city to implement some requirements related to accessibility, and specifically calls out the city's ability to ensure compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act. And so in that vein, we have included a requirement to maintain at least 48 inches of clear width for pedestrian travel on at least one side of that sidewalk vending operation. So in other words, if a sidewalk is 48 inches wide, a sidewalk vendor would not be able to set up at that particular location because there isn't an additional 48 inches of clear width for pedestrian travel around it. Now, in addition to that, we have also included not just the requirement to maintain that clear width, but a requirement for stationary sidewalk vendors to mark with removable tape on the sidewalk where that 48 inches is for ease of enforcement, and also to post multilingual notices, at least one, but in some cases there will be more than one, on the sidewalk vending apparatus itself, making clear that that 48 inches is to be maintained. There are requirements related to cleanliness and sanitation. Included among those are requirements for sidewalk vendors to maintain certain types of minimum cleaning supplies on site. The ordinance specifically calls out a dry broom, a dustpan, and some sort of absorbent towel or equivalent to clean up spills. It prohibits dumping except to vendor-provided receptacles. So the ordinance talks about how, yes, there may be trash receptacles on public sidewalks. Those trash receptacles are intended for and sized for pedestrian use of the sidewalks and not for commercial food sale type operations. So there's a requirement for sidewalk vendors to provide their own trash receptacles and to remove them after the vending is complete. And then any waste that they generate would need to go into those receptacles as opposed to being either dumped into the city's trash receptacles or into city landscaping, sidewalks, parkway areas, etc. If a sidewalk vendor uses heat, flame, or any sort of battery, electric, or gas-powered equipment in the course of their operation, we've included a requirement for them to have a fire extinguisher on site and for their personnel on site to have been trained in the use of that fire extinguisher should something happen. There is an outright prohibition on customer seating. State law requires the city to permit the sale of goods and food on public property, but does not explicitly require the city to then allow that sidewalk vendor to set up an outdoor dining room equivalent. So there's a prohibition on that type of use. There are only limited circumstances in which shade canopies, shade structures, and umbrellas can be used, namely over the sidewalk vending apparatus itself, and not, again, to provide customer shade or some sort of ancillary use to the sale component. Doesn't mean that there won't ever be a situation where that shade extends over where a transaction might be occurring, but doesn't allow the use of umbrellas or canopies for just kind of unrelated to the sale purposes. And then there are prohibitions on the sale or exchange of alcoholic beverages, cannabis and cannabis products, and then tobacco and tobacco cigarettes, consistent with other provisions of the city's municipal code. There are a host of other operations requirements in there, but again, I just wanted to touch on some of, I think, the bigger pieces of it. Wanted to talk a minute about enforcement. So the same state law that requires cities to allow sidewalk vending on public property also prevents cities and counties from enforcing those violations as criminal offenses. So we are specifically prohibited from treating violations of these sections of the municipal code as either criminal misdemeanors or criminal infractions. That is different than how we are generally permitted to enforce the balance of our municipal code. There are limitations on the amount of administrative fines that can be levied on violators of these sidewalk vending regulations. And then there's also a requirement that if we issue administrative fines to an alleged violator, that based on that person's provision of information contesting their ability to pay that violation, that the city reduce those administrative fines. And there's some specific requirements in state law that talk about how we're to handle that. We've included consistent provisions in the proposed regulations, but I did want to highlight this as the state law didn't just require us to allow sidewalk vending, it also limits the manners in which we can enforce against it, but it does leave intact our ability to handle enforcement through administrative means, which is consistent with a lot of how we handle code enforcement cases. It's obviously the last resort for us to go to that criminal penalty phase, but the difference with these regulations is we couldn't go to that criminal penalty phase if we felt that that was necessary. As far as next steps, today there's an opportunity for a public hearing and public testimony on the proposed ordinance. There would be, if the city council introduces and approves the first reading of the ordinance, there would be a second reading and consideration of adoption at your meeting on January 31st. Subsequent to that, those regulations, if adopted, would take effect 30 days thereafter. So, end of, I'd have to look at a calendar, but probably I think beginning of March. We are looking at a couple of additional provisions related to sidewalk vending at the staff level that we weren't ready to move forward with today. So we do anticipate that there will be a second ordinance put before you in the future with some additional regulations. And there is an annual application fee for a sidewalk vending permit that's referenced in this ordinance. We don't have that annual application fee for you today, but we are working on that. And if the city council moves forward with the adoption of this ordinance, we would bring that application fee to you in the future. That application fee, again, limited to just covering the city's costs of the permitting process consistent with state law. So our recommendation today is that after I conclude my remarks, you open a public hearing, receive any public testimony, then close that public hearing. And the staff recommendation is then that the city council approve the introduction and first reading of an ordinance read by title with further reading waived, titled An Ordinance of the City Council of the City of Laguna Woods, California, adding Chapter 6.44 to Title 6, Businesses of the Laguna Woods Municipal Code, to regulate sidewalk vendors in compliance with California Government Code Section 51038, including but not limited to by establishing restrictions and requirements directly related to objective health, safety, or welfare concerns, as well as by establishing a prohibition on stationary sidewalk vendors in areas that are zoned exclusively residential, and determining and certifying that the ordinance is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act. With that, I will turn it back over to the mayor for the public hearing.
The proposed ordinance is open now for public hearing. We will receive any testimony. Have we received any?
Oh, that's just the cursor, sorry. That's not actually, no, but thank you.
Madam Clerk, have we received any thing?
We have not received any public comments on this matter. Thank you.
Is there anyone here that wishes to address this particular matter from the public? Public hearing is now closed. Catherine, I'll open it to you, but only you.
Okay. I agree with the approach. What I'm concerned about is we need to make it very clear is where is the public property relative to the private property? Because that'll be some of the confusion. Because we have had circumstances over by Gate 11 where people have set up a fruit stand that's outside the gate. It's on Santa Maria.
Yeah.
But who owns Santa Maria? Is it, because I know there had been some question, relative to that the county has given you the easement, but does that then, even though it's not a through street and it's has a gate there where you can't go through, then is that then part of the village or is it part of the city? And, so I think that's going to need to be cleared up, or I think we're going to end up with some problems, and particularly since you can't even say if you've given a warning or they've removed them, you have no alternative other than an administrative fine that is related to the income, which may be zero, and so I'm not sure there's much enforcement on this thing, and so it's concerning. It's the right thing to do, but I'm not sure how it's going to be effectively implemented.
Thank you, Catherine. Good point. All right.
Yeah, and I can note just as a quick response to Catherine that the way state law is written, if it's operated by the city as a public pedestrian path to travel, it would fall subject to this. So on Santa Maria, the areas that are outside of those gates, along the sidewalk along the street there, that would be something that sidewalk vending is permitted there. Behind the gate at the end of Santa Maria, that terminus where technically the city holds an easement, but it's behind the gate, that's not being operated as a public pedestrian path of travel or a sidewalk. So that behind the gate area is prohibited for sidewalk vending, but in front of the gate along the city's sidewalks that we maintain, that would be public property where sidewalk vending is allowed.
Should be gate 8 and gate...
So not the gates themselves, just to be clear, but on the sidewalk on Santa Maria.
You've been there at gate 8 as well as gate...
No, gate 11, just outside gate 11, between 10 and 11. When you come up to 10, you go right to gate 11, and we got a sign there, says Laguna, the city, and gate 11 on the wall and on the planted area, and they have set up there. Now it's essentially, that's what my question is.
Yeah.
Is that private property or not?
Yeah, so that would be public property. There has been obviously discussion in the past where the city has, under some circumstances, conceptually agreed to abandon portions of our or vacate portions of our easements, but because the private property owner has not taken us up on that, for this purpose, they are public property still. So.
Okay, so that's my worry.
Yeah.
We'll go through and get an ordinance that we can't do anything with.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's start over. Angie, do you have anything, Annie?
Actually, I just want to say thank you, Chris. That was very informative and very thorough. I don't have any additional comments on it. Thank you.
Sure.
Yes, I do have additional comments. I would like staff and you to look into getting a carve-out on that law, because we have over 1,300 golf carts in this city. These are established golf cart paths. And even if there's a stationary vendor and he only takes up 48 inches, assuming no one's standing in front of him, golf carts will not be able to pass easily, or a wheelchair in a golf cart. These are paths, multimodal trails in paths of travel. We're in a senior community, and any vendor would be a hazard just by the fact that they're there, whether they have marked out tape or not. Because if they're on the corner where people walk across El Toro and Moulton, the ramps, the curb ramps, I've gotten very familiar with wheelchairs. You're going like this just to get around that vendor. That's not right. Some wheelchairs are built differently. Some could tip over. On golf cart paths, they shouldn't be there. And I have one more comment. No one has ever complained to me about fruit stands. They like the fruit stands. The only vendor that causes huge outrage and gets hundreds of emails from even people driving through the city, there's really nothing we can do anything about. So I'm going to vote against this ordinance because I don't want any of the residents that complain to me, why do you permit such a horrible thing? I don't want to, I'm not going to vote for it, so.
Thank you. Cynthia.
I think there is, first of all, there is, of course, a free speech issue about political speech. And so, since I'm a lawyer and sworn to uphold the Constitution of the United States, why I'm going to have to, I can't vote against it for that reason. But second, I will address this to Chris, as we are entitled to make restrictions related to the public welfare. If we have a large percentage or a substantial percentage of our residents who traverse these pedestrian paths of travel on golf carts or electric vehicles or other things, do we have the ability to require them to maintain more than 48 inches or to keep them 48 inches away from driveways or sloped pedestrian curb cuts or anything like that? Have you looked into that?
Yeah, so in particular, the golf cart question is one of the 5 or 6 things that we're still kicking around at the staff level. I imagine we'll be bringing recommendations back to you in the future regarding that. I do think Mayor Pro Tem Horn's comment about looking at whether there's any legislative will to either, like you said, to create a carve out specific to Laguna Woods or to further massage those aspects of state law that deal with accessibility and mobility on sidewalks specifically for that multimodal concern is a good one. And so if there's no concern from council members on that, that's certainly a conversation we can have with our state electeds. But in the short term, the golf cart thing and the navigability question, I think we'll come back to you on in the near future.
Does that mean that you think there's a potential that even in the absence of state law exemption, that we could look at the needs of our community and make a definition of protecting the public and the public welfare that would accommodate the various wheeled vehicles and the various issues that our pedestrians might have maneuvering around these stands?
I do. I think the open question is whether it goes as far as you might like it to go, which is where some change to state law might help to clear out some of the gray area. But I think that there are things that we can probably do in excess of just what's in this ordinance today related to mobility. I just didn't want to delay getting an ordinance to you and getting something on the books requiring that permit. I think several of you have heard me say this before, but often perfect is the enemy of good. And, you know, I think there's a clear need to move forward with something at this point.
Carol.
I strongly approve of what you've done here. You know, around the turn of the century, I think if you know very much about history, you know that Abraham Lincoln, which is the 1860s, not the turn of the century, but 1860s, I know that he lost one son and perhaps two to cholera typhus because people didn't understand about sanitary conditions, and it seems strange that they didn't understand it, but they did, and people died. When I was a child, it wasn't unusual, for people to have on their door that they were quarantined because the people inside had something. They had the measles or they had something, and you couldn't go in their house and they were not supposed to come out. We've made a lot of progress because we've understood about typhus, we've understood about cholera, we understand about sanitation, and we have these laws. In fact, in our county, I think I'm not required, I think it might be the register, one of them quotes which restaurants have been shut down because they go and inspect them. That's weird that we're going to charge and people have to pay permits, they're going to become inspected, and yet we're going to let someone on the corner cut up fruit with no way to wash their hands, no way to wash the implements that they have there, and they can sell that. That is the most strange. 946 is, I can't believe that that hasn't been challenged, because why would we have, the one thing that we've grown up, we have two people who certainly have studied the law. What is the law supposed to be? Is it supposed to be fair? No, it's supposed to be consistent. That you go to the law, you go, we all get the same rules. What we have here is two sets of rules. If you don't have any money, you can't charge them a fine. Do we do that with our restaurants? No, we make our restaurants comply with laws. They have to be inspected, they have to be permitted. And why did we do that? Just to make some money? No, we did it to protect ourselves. We want to have good health. And here we are allowing something like this. I find it totally bizarre. If we were to have some food served in this room, Chris would be calling up the county to come and take the temperature, make sure the food was at the proper temperature. And yet we're going to allow people who have no access to a restroom at all, they're going to be at a stand, they're going to cut up whatever they cut up and sell that food to someone else. How can that be? We're not going to warn anybody and say, hey, by the way, don't go to that stand over there because we don't inspect them. We don't do that. So why do we have two sets of rules? There should be one set of rules. We don't want to charge our restaurants permits. I can go along with that, but let's be consistent. Everybody has to obey the same rules. The rules are the same for everyone, and people in our city will understand that when they buy some food, that we support and comply with safe sanitary conditions. So to me, this is such a simple thing. If you want to sell a bag of oranges and they're not opened, hey, there's a bag of oranges. But once you start cutting up that fruit and you start putting it into containers and selling it to people, and we have no way of knowing what you did, whether you washed your hands, what you did, and how you cut it up, that I think we have two sets of standards. And I can't believe that we are being fair to mothers or any of these other communities when we demand that they be inspected, and yet we're going to let someone else. We know that what's happening in our county. We know that some of the diseases are beginning to occur again. Tuberculosis is one of them, a disease that we assumed was stamped out. So to me, it's common sense. We either have a rule or we don't have a rule. What did we learn? We learned in school to wash your hands. We learned in school that we inspect things. And so this is common sense to me.
Thank you. There's a song that I was reminded of as you were talking and in your frustration, and I think the first line was blowing in the wind. Okay. Cynthia.
Thanks. Chris, when you first, early in your presentation, you noted that when vendors apply for a license, one of the qualifications or requirements is that if what they are vending requires a license from someone else, like the health department, then they have to show proof that they have that license. Is that what I got from you?
Yeah, so if the healthcare agency requires a permit for the type of mobile food facility that they're operating, then,
like cut up fruit, if they do.
Yeah, I think I don't profess to be an expert on what they require permits on, but I know a lot of it has to do with the actual preparation of food. There's a lot of requirements around the preparation of meat, dairy products, that sort of thing. And so we would be allowed to require proof that they've obtained that mobile food facility permit. Those mobile food facility permits are obviously, I think to Councilmember Moore's comments, different than requirements for a fixed facility, right?
Yeah.
They're a different type of business. But yeah, we would, before they would be able to commence operation as a sidewalk vendor, they would be required to provide proof of those permits and licenses.
Okay, so we don't know exactly whether a vendor could cut up fruit and put it in cups without getting a permit from the health department, but it's possible that they might have to do that.
Yeah, I believe that the cutting of fruit requires a permit of some kind. We've included, best we could glean from the healthcare agency's resources, we've included some screening questions in our permit requirements that would help us have a conversation with the healthcare agency. We would expect that when we receive a permit application for a sidewalk vendor, that we would take that application and actively engage with the healthcare agency to verify whether there is a permit we should be getting from them, proof of a permit that we should be getting from them, or if based on their representations, they're exempt from the healthcare agency's permitting. So.
All right, as I understand it, from conversations we've had, Chris, there is, with respect to whether we adopt this or not at this particular time, under these particular conditions, there is a window of opportunity that if we don't take advantage of, that would be closed. And there would be no way that we would be able to exercise any reasonable degree of control. Is that a fair statement?
Well, I think right now,
Or am I overstating it?
Under SB 946, right now, sidewalk vending is permitted. The city doesn't have a permitting process, so they're able to vend in absence of our regulations. If we adopt regulations, there's an ability for us to the extent state law allows, regulate that activity. But right now, they're able to do so kind of on their own.
The door could be closed at some time.
Well, I think the thought, state law changes all the time, right? And oftentimes, laws on the books have different standing than laws that you thought about maybe adopting in the future but never got around to. And so I would say that to the extent the state changes the rules in the future, it's better to have rules on the book right now in the maybe off chance that they're grandfathered in when the state decides it's going to do something else. So I think it's a prudent step to have regulations of some kind on the books now, but I can't tell you what the future holds.
I understand that. But we aren't the leader in this. We're standing alone, are we?
No. Many cities have sidewalk vending regulations, including Laguna Hills, Aliso Viejo.
Maybe litigation at some point, but at least we're on record on a reasonable program that takes us to the extent we can.
Yeah, so one of the things that you see in the proposed ordinance in the agenda packet, as opposed to a lot of our ordinances, which are a little bit shorter, there are quite a few recitals, the whereas clauses at the beginning of this ordinance. That's meant to assist in establishing that there's a basis for us finding that these regulations serve those objective public health, safety, and welfare concerns. So I feel like the regulations that we put forward are very much in the spirit of state law and very conservative. We're not, if your concern is we're not going out on a limb and inviting litigation, I don't think we are with these. I think there's a very clear A to B relationship with why we're requiring them tying back to a public health, safety, or welfare concern.
For some specific issues like CEQA, we spent time on that as a fallback position. We're covered by that. We're not going to have to go out, in your opinion, and do a full CEQA investigation.
No, so our recommendation is that you find that we're exempt, that this ordinance is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act. We don't, in our professional judgment, view it to be a project requiring any further CEQA analysis.
Question I had asked myself earlier, what about overnight?
Mm-hmm.
You didn't mention anything about that, but you're not going to have these there overnight, are we?
So they can't be unattended. That's one part of it. They can't be unattended at any point. As far as operating hours, I would say that practically speaking, most sidewalk vendors cease operation in the early evening hours. They're just foot traffic drops a whole lot, and many of them don't have sufficient means of illumination, but state law only allows us to enforce hours of operation restrictions when they're consistent with the hours of operations restrictions that we impose on businesses and surrounding areas on that same street. And so in your current municipal code, the only zoning district where you impose hour of operations limitations is in neighborhood commercial. Now, practically speaking, there's only one property in the city that is zoned neighborhood commercial. So absent establishing hours of operation requirements for the other zoning districts, we really can't enforce just you have to be gone by 10 o'clock or 8 o'clock or something like that. That hours of operations piece, though, is another piece that we're looking at the staff level of whether there's something that we can do to put in place requirements that do extend evenly between the brick and mortar stores and the sidewalk vending stores and give us that additional means of enforcement. But if your concern is people setting things up, leaving them overnight and coming back to them in the morning, that's not permitted. State law doesn't allow that. We don't allow that. They're not meant to be permanent fixtures on public property. This is something that when attended is in use, and when not attended, they've taken it away and removed it from public property.
And you will be looking at what Mayor Pro Tem
Yes.
Warren has raised as
Yes.
a transportation issue. Okay.
Yeah, I think the multimodal concern is good. I think, you know, as I mentioned, there's maybe something that we can do on our own, but I do think that it's probably worth a conversation after we get through this process with our state legislators to take a look at what might close that loop a little bit.
With all that in mind, are we ready to vote on this? Okay. All in,
Ordinance?
The ordinance, I move the introduction and first reading of the ordinance.
thank you. Is there a second? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Aye? All opposed? No. All right. 4-1, the ordinance passes.
Thank you.
We move now to a very interesting one that very candidly, I had not thought about it until I read a letter that was received. And that is the street racing and excessive vehicle noise regulation. Now, let's have a staff report, and as part of that report, as part of the open hearing, I'll ask our city clerk to read a letter that was sent to us about this particular ordinance. So, Chris.
Yeah. I'll just make a couple of brief comments here. This item was originally agendized by Councilmember Moore in September. At that point, there was a unanimous vote for staff to draft an ordinance that's before you today that does two things. It prohibits street racing and it prohibits excessive vehicle-related noise on public streets. As you heard, I think at the September meeting, the Sheriff's Department has indicated their support for this ordinance, believes that these prohibitions will aid in their enforcement of vehicle-related noise and street racing incidents. As proposed, the ordinance would codify regulations within the municipal code that the Sheriff's Department would be able to use to cite violators, as opposed to citations that are issued under the California Vehicle Code, which are handled separate, because these citations would be issued using the Laguna Woods Municipal Code. After they're written, they would be provided to the city for collection. That's no different than our normal process for citations written under the municipal code, but I just wanted you to be aware that these aren't handled through the court system like a normal California Vehicle Code citation would be. And notably too, even though the city's municipal code would be amended to include prohibitions on street racing and vehicle-related noise, the Sheriff's Department would still retain the ability to enforce violations under the California Vehicle Code. This wouldn't in any way preclude their ability from using the tools that are already at their disposal. So aside from that, it's a pretty simple ordinance, two sections added to Title 8 of the Municipal Code. We will have an opportunity for a public hearing today, public testimony to be received. After that public hearing, staff's recommendation is that you approve the introduction and first reading of an ordinance read by title with further reading waived, titled an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Laguna Woods, California, amending Chapter 8.06 of Title 8 traffic control of the Laguna Woods Municipal Code related to vehicle, golf cart, low-speed vehicle, and motorcycle racing and noise, and determining and certifying that the ordinance is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act. I'm going to turn it back over to the mayor in a second for the public hearing, but I do want to mention that the letter that we received, which is part of the public record from William O'Dowd, dated January 16th, 2024, is available for the council members, is a part of the public record. Mr. O'Dowd is here today, so I don't know if you'd still like us, Mr. Mayor, to read the letter or just
If William is here?
yeah, Mr. O'Dowd's here. So when you open the public hearing, I just wanted you to be aware that we can certainly read the letter, but he's here to share his thoughts in person as well.
I'd
So
rather
with that, I'll
hear
turn it
from
back
him,
over.
But the public hearing is now open. We will hear from the public. We have William O'Dowd, who wrote to us on January 16th and indicated something to me that was a shock. Go ahead. That
I
was,
will read my letter.
would
may
you,
extemporize
would you
too.
like the letter read?
I will not commit not.
There you are, sir.
Do it.
Thank you.
And I'd like to know what shocked you, but anyway.
Yeah,
It's not every day I shock a mayor. Anyway, I'm writing to thank you for drafting this ordinance, which I strongly support. I've brought these issues to the city's attention in person and in writing for a few years now. I remember first writing to Mayor Moore, probably 5 or 6 years ago. Anyway, the problem is serious and persistent. My hope is that these regulations will be a step toward decreasing, if not entirely ending, these illegal behaviors. They affect both safety and quality of life for Laguna Woods Village residents. I had conversations, several now, with Captain Aldi of the Orange County Sheriff's Department. He has been very open to feedback and has assigned officers to police the problem area. I know that citations have been issued, but I also know that he has limited resources and his officers cannot be sitting on El Toro around the clock. Although that would be my preference, but yeah. I am somewhat realistic. My neighbors have told me that the street racing has continued to happen. I was hoping some of them would also write letters or be in touch with you. Perhaps that hasn't happened. Mostly around midnight or on weekends. And I've asked those who hear and observe these behaviors to let the council and Captain Aldi know when problems occur so that officers' time can be targeted most efficiently. Because we all understand that these regulations without effective enforcement will not really address the problem. I have not myself been aware of the ongoing street racing, but I will confess to you that I sleep in a room that has no El Toro facing window. I run a white noise machine and I sleep like a log. So so somebody could land a 747 in El Toro at night and I wouldn't know it. But my other neighbors are not so fortunate in terms of their sleep and have been hearing this and disturbed. So we all understand that regulations without enforcement will not fully address these problems. The one thing I would add that I didn't want to write too much, I wasn't going to be able to be here. I had to take a friend to a hospital appointment at City of Hope, and it's quite I'd never been there before, but it's quite an amazing place, and appointments actually occurred on time, which allowed me to get back. So I'm sure that's the least of their virtues, but that is one. In addition to my neighbors calling when things occur, it also occurs to me as a resident of the village that my HOA is paying for 2 people to sit 24/7 and staring out at El Toro at gates 1 and gate 5. And it would seem to me that they could be the eyes and ears of the Sheriff's Department in terms of letting people know when things occur. But I know those people don't actually work for you, so that's an issue that maybe can be brought up with the, I don't know who, the village, GRF, or whoever it is that does that. Because, it's very hard for officers to be called with no advance notice of when these things are going to happen. They can't get over there and stop it unless they happen to be a block or 2 away. So if we can figure out when these things are occurring and have people assigned at those times, they won't have to see flashing red lights too often to go away. Because there's lots of, I'd rather end the problem than move it, but I'll take moving it to someplace else. So that was my letter. What was shocking in my letter?
No, just that the hours that they were doing it. They were up at midnight. And
Yes. So
the streets are empty and they're doing 90 miles an hour on the street.
Yeah, unlike most of us, they're awake at midnight. And have nothing better to do, apparently. I don't know who these people are. But yeah, no, it's, and I have heard it. I just haven't heard it lately. I think the first time I came to the city council was last December, and that what drove me here was I looked out the window and heard this noise and saw these people tearing up and down the. It was quite shocking, really. So to me too. So anyway, I thank you for drafting the ordinance. I'll thank you even more enthusiastically if you pass it.
Thank you.
And if you have any questions, I'm happy to.
No, I think we're good.
Thank you.
I will now close the public hearing. And Chris, you have indicated what you want us to do, so are we ready to do it? All right, you have a comment?
First reading of the ordinance.
Yes, that's what we're doing. You move that. Do we have a second? I second. Carol? All right. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No. Sleep well tonight, Bill.
That's an enthusiastic thank you.
We have one more reading to make it official. All right. Let's go to a second reading, 9.1. Chris, what do you want us to do on this?
So the first reading of these objective design standards was at the December 20th, 2023 meeting. At that meeting, you conducted a public hearing, approved the introduction and a first reading of an ordinance that would continue our efforts to build upon those uniform expectations for the design of development projects. There was an ordinance that preceded that established them for the first time. This is the first round of refinements to them. It addresses partially two items on your significant work plan item list in the current budget and work plan, one related to objective design and development regulations, and the other related to crime prevention through environmental design regulations. The first ordinance has already become effective. This ordinance would become effective 30 days from this meeting if you adopt it today. The next step for us is to retain a consulting architect, so we'll be releasing a request for proposals for architects who have some expertise in this objective design standard development process. There are a number of firms that have worked with cities up and down the state to develop these, including some with surrounding cities. We'll be casting a wide net for it, but looking to identify a consulting architect who has done this before and is able to have a conversation with elected officials and translate that conversation into design standards that seem to meet the needs. But in the meantime, this ordinance builds upon that earlier ordinance in establishing some interim design standards until the consulting architect is able to work with staff and with the city council to craft something more comprehensive. So our recommendation today is to approve second reading and adopt an ordinance read by title with further reading waived, titled An Ordinance of the City Council of the City of Laguna Woods, California, amending sections 11.10.010, 11.10.020, 11.10.030, 11.10.050, 11.10.060, 11.10.100, 11.10.110, 11.10.120, and 11.10.130 of Title 11, Planning and Development of the Laguna Woods Municipal Code pertaining to objective design standards for certain new development and redevelopment projects, and determining and certifying that the ordinance is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act. There's an opportunity for public comments, though it's not a public hearing today, and then any council discussion and consideration of the item.
All right, are there any public comments on this ordinance? Hearing none, the public comments are closed. I'll look at council. Do we have any comments on this second reading? Cynthia.
First, I want to thank Chris because as complicated as it was for him to read this, he's the one who had to write it. So I'm very impressed. And I'm glad we're doing this. As Chris said earlier, the perfect is the enemy of the good. And we may want to revise these standards as we go along, but at least we're going to have something written so that we can maintain the architectural character of our community, because contemporary architecture seems to favor a conglomeration of all kinds of things. And if you look at this shopping center itself, you have river stones, you have wood, you have gray plaster, you have tan plaster, you have stainless steel, you have all kinds of things just all juxtaposed. And I've seen other new construction that looks like that with lots of different colors and lots of different textures. And we're a little more old-fashioned here. So I'm in favor of this. And I will move the second reading and adoption of the ordinance.
Second.
Who was second? You did, Sherry? Good. A good first step, an excellent first step. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. Okay. We come to council reports and comments. Let's start with the Coastal Green Belt Authority. Annie?
Thank you, Mayor. The Coastal Greenbelt Authority did meet last week here in the council chamber. We did, first of all, approve the schedule for our meetings for the upcoming year, which is the second Wednesday of every other month. And the council just really expressed their deep appreciation for the city of Laguna Woods for offering this chamber as a meeting place, and it is very convenient for everyone. Yeah, so really convenient for us. So they wanted to make sure that sentiment got conveyed. There were a few reports from some of the park people, and they just reported basically that their recruitment and retention efforts are ongoing. They're still suffering and dealing with some staff shortages, but they also reported that there were no real damage from the recent rains that we had, so all the parks were basically able to stay open. There was a report from Irvine, and it was an update on the e-bikes. And I'll just read what they said. In Q1 of this year, Irvine Police Department will start enforcing the updated municipal code, section 3-4-138 vehicles. Unless specifically authorized, no person shall drive or propel any automobile, truck, dune buggy, electric bike, motorcycle, motor scooter, ATV, or any other motorized power vehicle within the open space area. New trail entry signs have been posted to reflect those latest municipal code update. And so as of effective this year, this ordinance has been accepted, and the Irvine Police Department will start enforcing it. The authority has invited the Orange County Fire Department to come and do a presentation regarding fires, and as soon as that's been confirmed, that information will be conveyed as well. And then the last thing is the Coastal Greenbelt Authority has been reviewing the General Development and Resource Manual, which has been in effect for 25 years now, and there have been some new land and some additional open trails, and so the authority is looking at adding some addendums to this manual. And in the future, as we progress along, there will be a letter sent out to the cities and to the Board of Supervisors asking for some fundings to support updating these two manuals, and more information on that will be forthcoming. And that's the end of my report.
Thank you very much on a good report.
Noel, can I make a comment? Can I make a comment?
Yes, oh, certainly.
I just want to make a comment about the e-bikes. I know that among the park staff and among a lot of park users, e-bikes are considered a terrible thing in the parks. Primarily, I think, because they are not used in a manner consistent with park usage. There's always a conflict between the hikers on the trails and the mountain bikers on the trails. And bikers of all sorts tend to go barreling around on the trails. But the e-bikers, I think, probably barrel a little faster, and they don't have the respectability of having climbed up the hill before they barrel down it. But on the other hand, we have a lot of residents here who used to be pretty good bikers, and as the years go by, they're all transitioning to e-bikes. And these trails might not be accessible to them were it not for an electric assist. So there's two sides to the story, but I can certainly understand why the city of Irvine decided to go on that side.
I also just want to add that one of the main concerns is fire, the sparking of fire from these e-bikes. There could be a spark and it could create a huge fire. So that's one of the major concerns.
On the fire authority, the year 2030, as I have mentioned, is a watershed year for the fire authority and for us as a city. It is when the contract or the agreement expires and the current shape of the fire authority governing documents is up for review between now and that time. We have the structural fire fund cities, which very fortunately we are one of them, and we have the contract cities. The major issues when the fire authority was created back in near 2000, a little before 98, that period of time, was the equity issue of how's the money going to be raised and who's going to pay for the fire protection of the county. And this 20-some cities joined together, which are now 30 cities that joined together to do this. But we have these two classifications, and the contract cities are concerned that they're getting the poor end of the bargain because they have to pay for a lot of things in addition. And Irvine is smelling freedom out there. So this becomes a critical period of time. Chris and I are meeting next Tuesday, I believe it is, the 22nd, with Lori Zeller, who is the deputy chief, who is the financial wizard herself, and she is educating all of the mayors and the city managers in the fire authority with the history of how we came to where we are today and what the potential issues are going to be when we face that. So this is a watershed decade for the fire authority. But equally important, the fire authority has to maintain the quality of service that has distinguished it nationwide, that rapport with which individual firemen have with those who they serve. And I'm going to call on Annie to tell us now a personal story of her interaction. I warned you of her interaction with the marvelous Orange County Fire Department workers. What happened to you the other day, Annie?
Well, what happened was, anyway, I had came home from a meeting and I had lots of packages in my car, and I looked in my rearview mirror and there was a fire engine right behind me, and they were going to my neighbor's house. So I kind of stuck around to make sure my neighbor was okay. And so I said, is she okay? And they confirmed that she was okay, and they were coming back to their vehicle. So I had lots of groceries in the car, and so I said, well, since you're free, maybe you could help me carry the packages into my manor. And they said, of course. So they helped me carry my stuff into the house. So.
Only in Laguna Woods could that have happened. Because they do love us here. Thank you, Annie. All right. Who is next? The library board.
I want to, before I begin I'll do the library and then I'll do it. We didn't have a meeting, but the library board, I want to emphasize what the library does for the community. The library actually offers, because we are joined with all the other members of the county, and there are only, I think, like 6 that are private. Most of them are part of the Orange County Library system. the library system offers, believe it or not, this is the kind of thing they do. Well, librarians by nature are people who like to help people, so they go into that service automatically. They're drawn to it. They offer a high school degree. You can actually get a high school students who may have dropped out of school, don't have access for home, whatever, homeless, whatever. You can, through the library, actually, they offer a program that can help you. In fact, this last year, they had some students that did complete the program. So I mean, that's one of many kinds of things that the library offers. If you happen to come to our city, we're just about to move to the new quarters. If you come to the city, I think Yoli can tell you how busy it is. It's constant, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It's quite busy.
In our city really participates in it, and I have that frequent question that comes up, why do we need the library? Because we have a library in the village, and of course we do have a library in the village, but they actually serve two different purposes. The one in the village is not available to anyone who does not live in the community. You have to be able to pass through the gates to be able to gain access. This library, because it is part of the larger system, has access to a variety of books, a huge inventory because it covers the whole county, and those books are moved around. So a lot of book clubs access our library. So that's really the library report. I wanted to give a real quick one because Monday was Martin Luther King's birthday, and one of his strong, I think he said this, and I'm misquoting it, but maybe you can straighten it out. He said, everyone can be great because you can volunteer. And it so happened that I happened to look on my phone. It was the day before his birthday. Oh, sorry. See, it is that. Anyway, I happened to look on there, and it was an opportunity to volunteer at the food bank. And so I thought, oh gosh, yeah, I better do that. So I fill it out really quickly. I get to the bottom, and it says the registration is closed, and I thought they still had openings. It said it right there that they had openings. I thought, I filled it out. It didn't go in. I'm going in. So I went at 8 o'clock in the morning to the food bank, and they allowed me to volunteer even though I wasn't registered to do so. We did pack boxes, and I want to tell you that you would be, if you've ever attended our volunteer luncheon here at the village, you know how many people volunteer and how good it makes you feel to look around and see all these people who do so much here. But you had the same feeling. And someone was speaking, and I couldn't see because there were people, and the person speaking was sitting down. But he said something very interesting. He said, you know, Martin Luther King encouraged everyone to volunteer, and he wanted all people working together. And he said, if you look around you, and of course everybody then started to look around. We looked around, and it was a total mixture of income levels and all kinds of things. And I want to tell you, it was a great experience. So that's why Martin Luther King's statement was true, that volunteering is something we can all do. So there you go.
He made a number of great statements.
He did. It's kind of hard to enumerate them all. Yeah.
I wanted to just do another plug for the library.
Okay.
Several years back, we invited the Orange County Library to one of our club meetings, and so they brought an array of books for Black History Month, and they also came with their computers to sign people up to get their library cards and their e-cards, so that's another service that the library offered us.
Bet.
Mary, do you have a dead mosquito or something you can offer?
Well, we have a vector control meeting tomorrow, so I will get more information. Yes.
Thank you again for having her here, Lori here. Cynthia, Transportation Corridor Agency.
We had a very short and quick public meeting that mostly involved electing new chairs and vice chairs. And then we had a very long and contentious closed session to deal with litigation. And I think without revealing anything confidential, I'll just say that this discussion fell along the lines that litigation questions often do, where on the one hand, some people said, if this amount of money will settle the case, we ought to just be done with it and go on with our business. And the people on the other hand, on the other side of the case said, hell no, We got to fight this thing. So it was a long meeting.
And?
Did you formulate any personal opinion?
I ended up being on the fighting side
Okay,
and not the settling side.
all right. We'll watch with interest your reports. Okay. We have the watershed management.
Yes, we did not have a meeting, but I have a short slide presentation, which Chris was going to help me with. And I wanted to point out, you know, she showed up some pictures, the mosquito abatement, about the channels, because those channels are, you know, can be a problem because the water can just sit there. This was the Santa Ana Deli channel cleanup.
Is this a man-made channel?
Yes, this is the runoff that the channel is part of the stormwater runoff, which eventually runs into Back Bay. It's part of the larger flood control project for Santa Ana, Irvine, Costa Mesa, and Newport Beach. So when you look at that red line, that's where it's, you know, the water, the land is allowing the water to run down. It accumulates in that channel and then heads towards the end there. Because the channels for stormwater, all the trash and debris that are in the street or the path of stormwater will wash into this low point, and if the water slows down, then it's deposited. You look at that mess. And this is done periodically. A cleanup, I mean. Much of the material appeared to be from homeless individuals, such as clothing, packets of items, pillows, inflatable mattresses. They're all waterlogged, by the way, and really heavy. Packets of food occasionally still edible in their plasticized packages. I picked them up and I saw them. I couldn't believe it. All that bedding was heavy and difficult to remove, sometimes requiring 2 or 3 people to drag those waterlogged items up from that muck and that gook. And when you walked in it, it would kind of suck and pull on your foot. So you had a feeling of, being unsteady. And it goes back to the right, too. The accumulation of silt made it difficult to maneuver. Those squares, see those 2 squares in the center there off to the, they're very slippery, but they tended to form a bond, making it difficult to move about. Boots as well as gloves were provided by the cleanup people, and they were a must. I didn't get access to them until a little bit later, but I had to. As volunteers collected the debris, it was placed in these bags. We'd bring it up and they put it in those bags, which were taken up the walkway to be collected for removal. After 2.5 hours, the project ends. Most of the trash was removed, and it definitely was an improvement. But screens, can you see like in the back there? See like it looks like a log across there, and you see a white. Yeah, thanks, Chris, for showing that. It's just so sad. That is melted styrofoam. I really do think that at some point, I hope we can ban it for single use. It just really causes a terrible problem because it melts in the sun and becomes impossible to remove. So I talked to them, and then I asked my brother if he couldn't make some big screens. Oh, shoot, I'm sorry. If he couldn't make some big screens that could be used to filter. You put it down in the water and then move the water would run through, and it would allow the, to filter out all of that. That's something that I'm hoping. If he'd make 2 large ones, you could work in teams and lift all that out. That's quite a difference, I know, but it's very hard to turn your back when you still see stuff there. That bothered me, but it's definitely much better.
Is that a mosquito, a source of mosquito breeding?
Could be, I would suspect. There were 44 volunteers for Coastkeeper Organization led by Cotty Petrie Norris. Yeah, there I am. That collected an estimated 3,000 plus pounds of trash. There she is in the center. Thank you so much. That was a very productive morning. I think it went from 9 to 11, maybe, something like that. 44 people, and people from all over, and a lot of them younger, of course. That was good.
And that will last how long?
We'll be back in about, maybe 3 months. Another storm comes in, and then it washes down. And
So there's
Yeah, we have to keep working at it. Humans are not very tidy.
It looked like it wasn't necessarily dumped. It looked like it was swept away from encampments
It
because
could have,
good
all of the
food
above.
and clothing and
Yes,
bedding and
yeah,
stuff.
and they
that's-
abandon it too,
Yeah,
and, you know, they move on.
But we will close with the bridge builders. And again,
I believe we gave a presentation at last year's meeting. We do have a poetry reading coming up at, when is it?
where will that be held?
That's going to be in Clubhouse 7, right? Is it going to be, Councilman Horn is part of that panel that's going to be reading the poetry. And I just lost it on my phone. But it is,
Where will that be?
hang on just, yeah.
There will be 4 people reading, and it's about walking in our shoes.
Yes, Walking in My Shoes. It's going to be at Clubhouse 2 at 6:30 p.m.
Any other comments or reports from anybody on the council? Chris, have you got anything else? All right, we have no closed session, do we? All right. We will now adjourn our meeting, and we will meet next Wednesday, January 31st at 2 p.m. in this room.
January
And
31st.
the next regular meeting after the special meeting, oh, I'm sorry, that is an adjourned regular meeting, will be February 21, 2024.
Is it really? Look how far down it goes.
Yeah. It is a mess.
Gee, life goes to
This
14.
meeting is adjourned.